Firelli 9 was a cold and lonely world, the kind of planet where silence felt heavy and the air tasted like old frost. The sun was weak, the ground was white and cracked, and the wind sounded like someone whispering through broken metal. Most humans would not stay here for long, but Mira Solon was not like most humans. She stood outside her small research station with a scanner in her hand, watching the frozen horizon. Her breath formed clouds in front of her face as she checked the stability of the atmospheric processor she had been adjusting since dawn. "This planet is stubborn," she muttered. "But so am I." Mira was a terraformer trained to change dead worlds into living ones. She was used to working alone, but Firelli 9 was different. This time she had a companion, a silent, observant, and sometimes frustrating companion. His name was Kael'th, and he belonged to the ancient alien species called the Thalrai. They were tall, graceful beings with pale silver skin and dark, thoughtful eyes. They lived for centuries, sometimes longer. They cared more about knowledge than action, more about memory than change. They were watchers, not builders. Kael'th's job was simple: observe humanity's attempt to restore Firelli 9. He was not allowed to interfere. He was not allowed to help. He was only to record, analyze, and judge. Mira did not enjoy being judged. She sensed his presence before she heard him. His footsteps were soft on the ice. "It appears your adjustments may not hold, Engineer Solon," Kael'th said quietly. His voice always sounded calm, as if nothing in the universe could surprise him. Mira closed her eyes for a moment. "Good morning to you too." Kael'th tilted his head slightly, a gesture that meant he was confused. "I did greet you." "That was not a greeting," she said. That was criticism wearing a thin coat. Kael'th considered this. "Humans use strange metaphors." "Humans use metaphors that make sense," she replied. "Especially when someone's being rude." Kael'th blinked once. That was his version of a sigh. Mira knelt beside the processor again, tightening a loose panel with her gloved hands. The machine hummed weakly, struggling to keep the atmosphere stable. If it failed, a week's progress could vanish. Kael'th watched her work. He always watched. Mira could feel his eyes on her, heavy as the cold air. Finally, she spoke. "If you're not going to help, at least don't distract me." "My orders do not allow me to assist," Kael'th said. "Interference may influence results." "Yeah, I know," Mira snapped. "The Council sent you to watch the reckless humans. To make sure we don't break anything important." Kael'th lowered his gaze. "You misunderstand. The Council sent me because this world once belonged to my people. We lost it long ago. Now your species believes it can revive it." There was no anger in his voice, only old sadness wrapped in formality. Mira stopped working for a moment. "Do you want us to fail?" "No," Kael'th said right away. "I only struggle to believe success is possible." Mira snorted. "You haven't met enough humans then. We do the impossible before breakfast." Kael'th did not answer. He simply stood there, tall and quiet, like a statue carved out of ice. Hours passed. The sky slowly shifted from dull gray to a faint silver blue. Mira continued working, adjusting wires, resealing energy lines, and making sure the processor didn't collapse under the cold pressure of the planet. Kael'th recorded everything with a small device strapped to his wrist. He spoke softly into it every now and then. "Mira Solon displays persistence," he whispered. "Human behavior remains driven by emotion and determination rather than logic alone." Mira pretended not to hear him, but she rolled her eyes behind her visor. When the repairs were near completion, the wind suddenly changed. The temperature dropped sharply. The scanner beeped a warning. Mira frowned and checked the reading. "That's not good." Kael'th stepped closer. "What is happening?" "The processor is losing power faster than expected," Mira said. "If the main stabilizer fails, this whole sector could freeze solid. Can it be repaired?" "Yes, but not from out here." Mira took a deep breath. "I'll need to go inside the processor chamber." Kael'th's eyes widened just a little. For a Thalrai, that meant shock. "That chamber is dangerous," he said. "Temperatures inside may drop below survivable levels." "Your suit will not protect—" "I don't have a choice now," Mira said. "If we lose this processor, we lose weeks of work. And humans don't quit just because it's hard." Before Kael'th could finish objecting, she opened the heavy hatch at the base of the machine. Cold air rushed out like a tidal wave. Even Kael'th stepped back. "Mira," he said, and for the first time there was something close to fear in his voice. "There must be another way." "There isn't," she said simply. "But thanks for worrying." He blinked again. "I am not Yes, you are, she said with a small grin. It's okay. I won't tell anyone. Before he could respond, she descended into the chamber. Inside the processor, everything was chaos. Frost covered the walls. Steam hissed from broken pipes. Sparks flashed in the darkness. The noise was loud, a deep metallic rumble mixed with the harsh crack of freezing air. Mira fought against the cold and moved toward the stabilizer core. She checked the control panel and saw the problem right away. One of the power conduits had cracked under the pressure. She pulled out a repair kit from her belt and began to work with frozen fingers. Outside, Kael'th hovered near the hatch, pacing back and forth. Thalray did not pace. Their people valued calm and control, but he could not stay still. He looked at the open chamber. The air inside glittered with ice shards. If she dies, this mission ends, he whispered to himself. But another voice inside him, one he barely recognized, added something else. And you will regret not helping her. Kael'th closed his hands into fists. He was not allowed to intervene. He had sworn to observe only. But humans kept surprising him. Mira kept surprising him. She was reckless, loud, and stubborn, but she was also brave. She pushed forward even when the universe seemed determined to push back. And now she was risking her life for a machine. For a dream, for a world his people had abandoned long ago. Inside the chamber, the stabilizer suddenly groaned. The support frame shuddered. Mira looked up just in time to see a large piece of ice-covered metal break loose from above. She jumped back, barely avoiding it. Okay, she muttered, shaking. Almost done. Just hold together a little longer. Her visor fogged. Her fingers ached. Her breath felt sharp in her lungs, but she kept going. She finished sealing the conduit, then forced the panel closed. She hit the power switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stabilizer hummed to life. The lights steadied. The atmosphere readings rose. Mira let out a long breath. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. She climbed out of the chamber slowly, shivering as she reached the surface again. Kael'th stood right there, waiting. His eyes softened when he saw her. You survived, he said quietly. Of course I did, she said. Told you. Humans are stubborn. Kael'th looked at the processor, then at Mira. I believe I still misunderstand your kind, he said. But I want to understand better. Mira smiled, tired but genuine. Then stick around. You'll learn soon enough. Kael'th nodded slowly. Perhaps I will. As the weak sun rose over the frozen horizon, a thin mist of warm air drifted from the processor vents. It was the first true sign of change on Varelli 9. Small, fragile but real, and just like that small warmth, something between Mira and Kael'th also began to thaw. Something slow, something unexpected, something that would grow, just like flowers blooming after winter. The days on Varelli 9 slowly grew brighter, even if the sunlight was still weak. The air felt slightly less sharp, and the ground showed small patches where frost began to loosen its grip. Mira Solon stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, checking the climate readings on her wrist device. The numbers were small, almost tiny, but they were proof of progress. Temperature up by 0.08%, she said with a grin. I'll take it. Behind her, Kael'th approached silently. As usual, his steps barely made sound. His long coat brushed against the icy ground, and the faint glow of his wrist recorder lit his calm face. You appear satisfied with these results, Kael'th said. I am, Mira answered. It means the planet is listening. Kael'th looked at the sky. Your species speaks of worlds as if they were alive. Well, maybe they are, Mira replied. At least a little. And this one is waking up. Kael'th paused, studying her expression. Your optimism continues to surprise me. It's called hope, Mira said. Humans need it. Without hope, we would never leave our homeworld. We wouldn't explore. We wouldn't fix broken planets. Kael'th tapped something into his recorder. Hope, a strong motivator, Mira smirked. You're analyzing my feelings again, aren't you? It is my duty, he said simply. Right, duty. Always duty with you. Mira sighed, not annoyed, just curious. Doesn't it ever get heavy? Always following rules. Always watching but never acting. Kael'th's silver eyes grew darker for a moment. It is what I was trained to do. That didn't answer the question. Kael'th looked away, pretending to check the horizon. Your work today requires assistance? Mira laughed softly. Nice try. Changing the topic won't work forever. Kael'th did not reply, but a faint crease formed between his brows. For a Thalray, that was almost an emotional confession. Later that morning, Mira opened the greenhouse dome. Inside, the air was warmer, protected by layers of transparent panels. Rows of experimental plants stood in soil brought from off-world. Most were tiny sprouts, trembling as if unsure whether this strange planet would accept them. Mira knelt by a row of green shoots. "Look at this. They're growing." Kael'th leaned closer. He looked fascinated, but he hid it behind a calm expression. "This progress is unexpected." "Unexpected?" Mira frowned. "Well, excuse me for doing my job." Kael'th shook his head. "That is not what I meant. These plants come from a world filled with sunlight, water, and rich soil. Here, everything is different." "Yeah, but they're trying," Mira said proudly. "Just like us." Kael'th stood very still, his gaze resting on the small green leaves. "My people lost their plants here long ago," he said quietly. The soil grew too cold. The skies dimmed. "We left," Mira looked up. "You abandoned this world?" "We had no choice," Kael'th answered. "The planet entered a deep freeze. It was beyond saving, but you never tried to fix it." Kael'th hesitated. "The Thalray do not change worlds. We study them. If a world cannot support us, we leave it and preserve its memory." Mira sat back on her heels. "That sounds lonely." Kael'th blinked, surprised. "Lonely?" "Yes." Mira gestured around her. "You leave. You watch. You don't fight for things. You don't try to make them better. Doesn't that feel empty?" Kael'th seemed troubled by her words. His voice became soft. "It is safer to avoid loss." Mira let out a breath. "Safe isn't always living." Her tone was calm, but Kael'th lowered his eyes, as if those simple words reached a place inside him he rarely touched. That afternoon, the ground trembled. Mira and Kael'th were checking a wind converter when the vibration rolled beneath their feet. It was deep and heavy, like something waking up underground. Mira steadied herself. "What was that?" Kael'th's expression shifted quickly, worry flickering across his face. "I recognize this signature." Another tremor shook the ground, stronger than before. Snow cracked. Ice snapped. A low rumble echoed through the valley. "Mira," Kael'th said, "we must take shelter." "No," Mira said firmly. "Something's wrong. And it's coming from under us." She scanned the surface with her device. The reading flashed red. "There's a power surge underground. A huge one." Kael'th stepped closer. "This cannot be possible. The Thalray technologies buried here are dormant. They should remain dormant. Well, clearly they're not." Mira snapped as another shockwave rippled through the ice. Kael'th stared in disbelief, but they were sealed away thousands of years ago. Nothing should awaken them unless what? Mira demanded. Kael'th swallowed, a rare gesture for his kind. "Unless the planet reaches conditions close to what it had before the freeze." Mira's eyes widened. "You mean because the terraforming is working?" Kael'th nodded slowly. "Your progress may have triggered an old system." Mira closed her eyes for a moment. "Okay, great, so we woke up something ancient and probably dangerous." A loud cracking noise cut through the air. A section of ice collapsed near them, revealing a deep glowing cavern beneath. Blue light pulsed from it like a heartbeat. Mira took a step forward, but Kael'th grabbed her arm, another rare thing for him to do. "No," he said. "The defense systems may activate." "Defense systems?" Mira repeated. "You could have mentioned that earlier." "I did not think they still functioned." "Well, they do." Another pulse of light rose from the cavern, sending a wave of cold air that pushed them back. "We need to get down there," Mira said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "If this thing reverses the terraforming progress, everything we've worked for will be gone." Kael'th's grip tightened slightly. "The Council forbids interference." "My role is to observe, not alter." Mira pulled her arm free. "Kael'th, if you don't want to help, fine. I'll go alone." She ran toward their vehicle. Kael'th remained still for a long moment, torn between duty and something new, something he felt but could not name. He heard Mira's words echo in his mind. "Safe isn't always living." Kael'th exhaled slowly, then followed her. They descended into the cavern together. The air grew colder with every step. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, lighting their path. The chamber was vast, filled with ancient machinery shaped like smooth stone but pulsing with soft blue energy. At the center stood a massive obelisk covered in more symbols. It vibrated with hidden power. Mira approached it cautiously. This is the source. Kelth stared at the obelisk with a mixture of fear and sadness. It was designed to protect the world. When the planet began to die, it activated and forced the freeze to slow the collapse. But now it's trying to freeze the world again, Mira said. It thinks it's saving it, Kelth nodded. Yes, she touched the surface of the obelisk. A shockwave knocked her back. Kelth caught her before she hit the ground, you see? He said, voice tense. It is dangerous, Mira stood again, brushing off frost. Dangerous or not, I have to shut it down. Kelth looked torn. If I help you, I break my orders. If you don't help, Mira said quietly, this world stays dead forever. Kelth looked at her. Really looked. He saw her determination, her stubborn strength, her belief that broken things could be fixed. Something inside him shifted. My people fear pain, Kelth whispered. They fear losing what they care about. So they stopped caring. Mira placed a hand on his cold arm. Then maybe, it's time to care again. Kelth closed his eyes. A long, heavy breath left him. Then he stepped toward the obelisk. Very well. I will help. Together they worked. Mira used her engineering skills to locate the power conduits. Kelth used his knowledge of Thalrai symbols to identify the shutdown sequences. Frost bit at their fingers. Blue energy crackled around them. The obelisk resisted, its systems old and confused. This world once meant something to your people, didn't it? Mira asked while adjusting a panel. Yes, Kelth said softly. Someone I cared for lived here. When the freeze came, I could not save them. Since then, my kind has avoided attachment. Mira glanced at him, her expression gentle. I'm sorry. Kelth looked at her and something vulnerable passed across his face. You humans are strange. You accept love even when it hurts. Maybe that's why we survive, Mira said. We don't let fear decide everything. The obelisk shuddered violently. The shutdown sequence was almost complete. Kelth placed his hand on the final symbol. Once I do this, the council will know. Then let them know, Mira said. Saving a world is never wrong. Kelth pressed the symbol. A blinding light filled the chamber. Then silence. Slowly, the glow faded. The machinery powered down. The air warmed slightly. The ancient system was finally asleep. Mira let out a shaky laugh. We did it. Kelth stood beside her, shoulders relaxed for the first time. Yes, we did. Mira looked up at him. So, you broke the rules. Kelth nodded. For the first time. How does it feel? He considered this, then said quietly, It feels correct. Mira smiled. And somewhere, deep in the silence of the cavern, a thaw began. Not just in the ancient machines, but in Kelth's long-frozen heart. The ancient cavern grew silent after the obelisk shut down. The blue lights that once pulsed like a cold heartbeat faded until only faint markings glowed on the walls. Mira Solon sat on a fallen stone block, breathing hard, her hands still shaking from the energy discharge. Kelth stood nearby, calm on the outside but trembling inside. His skin shimmered with weak silver light, sign of exhaustion for a Thalrai. You okay? Mira asked. Kelth nodded slowly. The shutdown caused a mental echo. The machine connected to my memories. It was unpleasant. Mira frowned in concern. You should rest. Kelth looked at her with soft eyes. I will rest when we reach the surface. Mira smiled. Fair enough. They began climbing the narrow crystal steps back toward daylight. Above them, the sun was rising higher in the sky, sending soft white light into the cavern entrance. When they finally reached open air, Mira gasped. A thin layer of frost had melted around the valley. Not much, just a few meters. But on Varelli 9, even a small change meant everything. Kelth lifted his head, feeling the world in a way humans could not. The atmosphere is stabilizing. The obelisk's shutdown has stopped the freeze cycle. Mira laughed softly. We did it, but Kelth's expression turned troubled. The council will not see it that way. Mira's smile faded. Because you helped me? Yes, Kelth said. I broke a direct order. I interfered with old technology, and I allowed human methods to override Thalrai systems. Mira crossed her arms. You saved a planet. How can anyone be angry about that? Kelth looked away. My people do not think like yours. They value harmony. They avoid risk. And they fear emotional choices. Mira's voice softened. You were brave. You acted because you cared. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Kelth's eyes returned to hers, full of quiet conflict. I only hope they will understand. For the next few days, the planet changed faster than before. The atmospheric processors ran smoother. The wind converters collected more energy. The greenhouse plants stood taller, no longer trembling like they did before. Some leaves were strong enough to push tiny color buds out of the soil. Every morning Mira checked the readings, and every morning she smiled wider than the day before. "We're close," she said one evening while scanning the sky. "Another month and we might see full sunlight hours." Kelth observed the horizon. "It is beautiful. Not as my people remember, but beautiful in a new way. You can say human way," Mira teased. Kelth's lips curved slightly, his version of a smile. "Yes, a human way." They stood together quietly, watching the distant glow of warming air. Even in the cold, the moment felt warm, but their peace didn't last long. 3 days later, Kelth received a message from the Thalrai Council. A sharp blue symbol flashed on his wrist device. Kelth froze as soon as he saw it. His shoulders stiffened. Mira walked over. "What's wrong?" Kelth's voice grew heavy. "They know. The council knows I shut down the ancient obelisk." Mira stepped closer. "What did they say?" Kelth opened the message. A calm, formal hologram appeared, an elder Thalrai with pale eyes and a strict expression. "Observer Kelth," the hologram said, "you have violated the non-interference directive. You are to return to the homeworld immediately for evaluation." Mira clenched her jaw. "Evaluation? Sounds like punishment." Kelth didn't respond. He simply closed the message and lowered his arm. "Mira," he said quietly, "I must leave." "No," she said firmly. "You don't have to." "It is not a choice," Kelth answered. "If I do not return, they will send others to bring me back." Mira shook her head. "Kelth, you helped save a planet. They should thank you, not punish you." Kelth looked at her with a sad, conflicted expression. "You do not understand. My people fear the past. They avoid anything that reminds them of loss. By helping you, I broke their most sacred barrier." Mira took a breath. "Then I'll talk to them. I'll explain." "You cannot," Kelth said gently. "The council does not listen to outsiders." Mira stared at him in frustration. "So that's it? You're just leaving?" Kelth looked at her with warmer eyes than she had ever seen from him. "Mira, I do not want to leave." Something in her chest tightened. "Then don't," she whispered. Kelth closed his eyes as if her words hurt in a strangely sweet way. "If I stay, I become a traitor to my people. And if you go?" Mira asked softly. Kelth turned away. "I will lose the first reason I have had to care in many years." The silence that followed was deep and delicate, like fresh snow. That night, Varelli 9 saw its first warm breeze, only a small one, but it carried the scent of damp earth and young plants. Mira and Kelth stood inside the greenhouse, surrounded by tiny flowers blooming in soft colors. Pink, pale blue, yellow. The place felt alive. Mira touched a small blossom. "You see this? This happened because of you." Kelth looked around, his expression peaceful but sad. "It is beautiful. And it shows what humans do best." "What's that?" Mira asked. Kelth met her eyes. "You grow, even in the coldest places." Mira swallowed. "Kelth, you're part of this too." He shook his head slowly. "I was only a witness." "No," Mira said firmly. "You chose to help. You chose to stay when it mattered. That isn't just watching. That's living." Kelth looked at her as if he wanted to believe her words. But before he could reply, his device chimed again. The council had sent another message. Mira grabbed his wrist before he could open it. "Don't." He looked at her hand on his. "Mira." She stepped closer, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You told me your people stopped caring because they feared pain. But you cared anyway. You took the risk. You changed." Kelth's voice was almost a whisper. "You changed me." Mira felt warmth rise in her chest. "Then don't go back to being someone you're not." Kelth stared at her, the conflict inside him almost visible. But then, slowly, something shifted in his eyes. A strength Mira had only seen once before when he helped her in the cavern. "I want to stay," he said. "Not as a watcher, but as a guardian of this world." Mira exhaled in relief. "Then stay." Kelth looked at the flowers, then at Mira again. "But the council will deal with them together," Mira said. "Humans don't run from problems, and you don't have to either." Something warm and bright formed in Kelth's expression, something like hope. The next day, Kelth sent a message back to the council. He stood tall, his voice calm but firm. "I will not return," he said. "I choose to remain on Varelli 9. I choose to stand with humanity. This world deserves guardians, not watchers." When the message ended, Mira placed a hand on his shoulder. "That took guts," Kelth breathed slowly. "I am afraid." "That means you're alive," Mira said with a smile. Weeks passed. The sky turned a soft blue for the first time in centuries. The warmth spread farther across the land. Green patches appeared along the valleys. The atmosphere processors hummed with stable energy. Mira and Kelth walked together through the fields that were once solid ice. New flowers grew where frost once ruled. "Hard to believe this was all frozen not long ago," Mira said. Kelth nodded. "Your species accomplished something remarkable." "Our species," Mira corrected gently. Kelth blinked at her, then slowly smiled. "Our species." They stopped at a small hill overlooking the valley. The wind brushed lightly against them, warm instead of biting cold. Mira looked at the world below. "We did it, Kelth, together." Kelth turned to her, his voice filled with quiet truth. "Yes, and because of that, something inside me has thought as well." Mira met his gaze, feeling the meaning behind his words. Their connection, like the planet around them, had grown slowly, patiently, carefully, like flowers blooming after winter. And now, standing in the soft spring light of a new world, it felt like something that would last forevermore.